Good morning, everyone. My name is Emily Finnegan. I am the Water Project Manager at the Local Government Commission. Welcome back for those of you that joined us day one. We are here for day two of the virtual summit, Ensuring Equitable Involvement in Regional Water Planning. For those of you that were able to attend, we hope you enjoyed day one, and we'd love to get a sense of the virtual room this morning. You'll see on the right-hand panel, there is a poll that should be launching right now to select one of the following that best describes you, and there will be a short list. So go ahead and start that poll on the right-hand panel. We are excited to transition to the Hopin platform. Congratulations, you all navigated your way to the platform. We'll be using this platform for days 2 and days 3. But we know that learning new technology can feel overwhelming, but we are here to help. Some of you have already started using our summit@lgc.org email for your questions. We've also supplied Hopin Tech guidance that will be pinned at the top of the chat to walk you through the ins and outs of the platform throughout the day. If you're still having questions, you can chat Atlee Keller from the main stage by selecting people within that top right panel and typing in her name. During the sessions today, you'll have a tech moderator in your room to help you answer any questions. So on Thursday, back in the day, we set the stage for some background and history of the Integrated Regional Water Management, Disadvantaged Community, and Tribal Involvement story. Now that we've laid this foundation, today we'll be moving into the actual strategies to better engage and address the needs of underrepresented communities. You may have started dipping your toes into strategies during our closing breakout sessions on Thursday, but today we're going to dive deep, pun intended. Before we get started, I'd like to once again thank our summit sponsor, the Santa Ana Watershed Project Authority, and our phenomenal advisory committee that has helped us put together the agenda and the amazing speakers that we have today. We won't be sharing everyone's impressive bios from our speakers, but you can find all of the speaker bios in the speakers tab on the attendee packet, which is also pinned at the chat. Just looking at the poll, it looks like we have the majority as government agency today, and a good amount of water agency folks as well. Welcome, welcome. And I'm sure those numbers will change as more folks complete the poll. To get you moving on the chat this morning, we'll have you type into the stage chat what you consider to be your home water body. You'll see that again on that right-hand panel under the chat tab. Make sure the word stage is highlighted in green. Now go ahead and share the lake, river, stream, creek, or ocean that you consider home and closest to your heart. And as you are doing that, I will welcome our Summit MC back to the stage, Anacita Agustinez, to introduce our morning keynote speaker. Anacita?
Great, thank you, Emily. Well, good morning, all my relations. Yate Abina, and welcome back to day 2 of the summit. Before we start today, I would like to once again acknowledge the first inhabitants of the land, and I honor the Miwoks, the Maidu, the Nishinan, the Patwin, and the Northern Yokuts. Thank you for this honor to speak on your land. I also encourage each of you, many of you are typing in your water bodies, but I also encourage you to find out whose traditional land each of you are joining from today and honor the First Peoples by typing their nation's name into that chat now. Thank you for your answers, and we learn from teaching each other. We designed the summit as a 3-part series with content that builds off of the previous day's convening in order to maximize the learning and opportunities for collaboration. However, we know how each of you are very busy people, so each day is designed with a unique theme so that if you're only attending today, we intend to have you take the best benefits from each day if that's the only opportunity you have to join us. And I remind everyone that we are recording these summits on the 3 days, so you'll be able to take a review and also share within your communities. As Emily mentioned last week, we set the stage for the summit by sharing more about the long history of the IRWM Disadvantaged Communities and the Tribal Involvement Program, how each has involved, which folks have learned from being engaged in IRWN for more than a decade. So that was an amazing session with lots of commitment over time from each of those practitioners that we heard from last Thursday. Today, we're going to move beyond the lessons learned, and we're going to dive deeper into the strategies that each region have used to identify, to address, and respond to the local needs. And at the end of today, our community and tribal leader panel is going to prime us for tomorrow's discussion on the future of marginalized community and tribal involvement and how we as public agencies can improve. So briefly on the agenda. If you go to the event chat, the top of the chat should have today's agenda pinned. Please take a moment to review that agenda with me. As I mentioned, we're going to begin our opening with an opening speaker to prime us for today's discussion, followed by our first round of concurrent sessions on strategies for engaging communities. There's 3 sessions, and each of those sessions are filled with amazing practitioners and community activists. And then we'll move from the needs assessments to project implementation, reassessing in times of crisis. Participants will be able to select one of the 3 sessions that you'd like to attend. And there'll be instructions, and please, if you get confused with any of the instructions, just use the chat, and Emily and Natalie will get you directed to our production crew. Following the break, we'll dive into a region-specific breakout session, and each region and session will come back together. After that session, we'll come back together for the community and tribal leader panel. So I would be remiss not to thank each and every one of our attendees for your participation, learning the new hop-in program, staying with us through the chats and engaging with your thoughtful questions. I also want to thank each of our speakers and panelists. You bring incredible knowledge and experiences, and obviously the summit would not be what it is without your participation, without your commitment, and without your community supporting what you do. So I just honor you for that commitment, and thank you, and thank your communities for supporting you. So let's begin our program. This morning we are so honored to have Yana Garcia, Deputy Secretary for Environmental Justice, Tribal Affairs and Border Relations at the California Environmental Protection Agency. Yana will be discussing strategies to identify and address local needs. And if you haven't had a chance to review her bio on the attendee packet, please become familiar with her work. It's beyond just what tribal relations and border relations is. I think that Yana is doing an incredible job, and I'm really looking forward to hearing Yana's presentation. So Yana, please join us.
Thank you, Anasita. Thank you for that. What an honor for that to come from you, given all the wonderful work that you do on behalf of all of us and on behalf of so many tribes across our state. Good morning. My name is Yana Garcia. I am joining you this morning from Ohlone Territory in the San Francisco Bay Area in Oakland. I wasn't asked, but I will answer the question that my home water body is certainly the San Francisco Bay. I am born and raised in Oakland, California. Grew up in East Oakland. My family is from East Los Angeles, so lots of Easts. Originally, farm workers from Mexico made our way up here to California, as so many have. Really, really excited to be here with you all. As I looked through the agenda, I have to say I'm a little jealous that I can't join for the entire all of the sessions. You all have some exciting programs that you've already been through and that you will continue to go through here today. In the short time that I have, I just want to focus on just a couple of ways in which we're thinking about environmental justice and equity-related issues in light of the ongoing multiple crises that so many of us are dealing with and that we know our most marginalized and vulnerable communities are dealing with most heavily. And want to talk a little bit about some of the lessons that we've learned at the state level. Before I do that, though, just want to share a little bit about my own background. Before coming to Cali, PA, I came from a professionally largely an advocacy background and worked with many environmental justice based organizations, as well as some tribes prior to becoming an attorney outside of the state of California, but really came up in the environmental justice movement through work with groups like Communities for a Better Environment, and many others who do a lot of work around land use issues at the local level in the Inland Empire in Southern California, in Southeast LA, in Oakland, in Richmond, and have increasingly through my work now learned so much about how diverse our incredible state is, and how regardless of where we are in this state, regardless of, I think for what many of us think of as our ultimate CalEnviroScreen score, I think many of you are probably familiar with the CalEnviroScreen tool, which we use at the state level to really look at where vulnerability and cumulative health and pollution burdens exist. There are communities that need our help. There are communities that need some support to develop the solutions and the vision for their future that they certainly have and have not been given the opportunity to articulate or to apply. So I want to talk a little bit about our approach at Cal EPA. As I mentioned, I think everybody is pretty familiar with a tool that we use called CalEnviroScreen. When we think about environmental justice and what that means, I think the immediate thing that comes to mind is the concept that one's zip code, race, and income should not define your access to benefits and burdens associated with environmental protection. It should not define your lifespan, should not define your ultimate health outcomes, your access to clean air, clean water, and a safe place to live, work, and play. In order to understand, where some of the burdens are most disproportionately located, several years ago, we developed a tool called CalEnviroScreen that takes a cumulative impacts approach to looking at where geographically communities are located that are suffering through some of the heaviest pollution burdens in the state. This tool, I think, has a lot of value for us at the state level, but I want to just focus on a couple of the ways in which it's really valuable for our local government agencies as well. I think that the most commonly known use for this tool is to identify disadvantaged communities for the purpose of California climate investment, focused, targeted investments from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund that we administer statewide. That means that a lot of folks just simply use it as a screening tool to look at the top 25% scoring census tracts under CalEnviroScreen. These are some of the highest pollution burdened communities in our state. But what the tool actually has are multiple layers of really rigorous data that really can inform how we think about what is affecting a given community at any particular time. What we see in using the CalEnviroScreen more and more, particularly today as we're answering questions around the interplay between pollution burden and COVID-19 vulnerability, is that the layers of data are more informative than the ultimate score, in fact. You can have communities in the northern reaches of our state that may not score particularly high as their ultimate cumulative burden score, but have a high rate of pesticide use, for example, or a high score in a drinking water impairment category or indicator set, or that simply have some concerning rates of low infant birth weight. These are all issues that we can pay attention to for particular decisions that are within our purview, are within our jurisdiction, and that we can think about over time as we're approaching our planning. The other thing that I want to note about the CalEnviroScreen tool and the unfortunate terminology of disadvantaged communities is that one of the things that we've been talking to community members more and more about is that term itself, the disservice that it does to communities themselves, to residents themselves, and to so many of us as government agencies, as public servants, as those that are working toward developing solutions that should be serving these communities. I think what we miss by simply calling them disadvantaged communities is the fact that these are partners. These are thought partners. These are creative problem solvers. These are experts. There are experts that are living in the communities that we're consistently referring to in this way. And by not acknowledging the cultural and intellectual assets that exist in these communities, we miss out on opportunities for critical partnerships, particularly at a time when so many of us in the public sector, in government, may be dealing with budget cuts as a result of the COVID-19 economic fallout, and when we're dealing with less resources over time. So for us at Cali PA, we've been thinking a lot about how to do more with less, how to think about applying a more holistic lens through our environmental justice work, and how to uplift the role that our environmental justice framework has given us already to think about where we get more from our limited investments. When we're focusing our investments of time, of resources, of attention in communities that need it the most, we can make the biggest impact. And when we're thinking about communities that are suffering from environmental justice challenges, these are largely the same communities that are suffering from rampant COVID spread. These are largely the same communities that unfortunately are accruing debt from unpaid water or other utility bills, that are dealing with unsafe and substandard housing, that need our attention not only from a regulatory standpoint, but from a planning and land use standpoint. And so I want to emphasize that partnerships during this time are so critical, not only with community residents and community-based organizations serving those residents, but also with each other across government. We have a number of tools that we're developing and a number of resources, some of which we actually got from our local government examples. We've recently participated in the Government Alliance for Racial Equity over the past several years, over the past 3 years to be exact. We've been members of the Government Alliance for Racial Equity work. We've developed a racial equity action plan, are looking toward refining our approach on identifying racial disparities in our work. Oftentimes we talk about environmental injustice affecting cumulatively impacted communities. And the reality is these are Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities at the end of the day, no matter where they are. And so we're really looking at ways in which we can better approach our work from a racial justice standpoint, and are happy to share lessons that we've learned, and more than anything, also happy to learn from you all about how you're applying a racial equity lens. If you have been a member of the Government Alliance for Racial Equity work, if you seek to be a member of the Government Alliance for Racial Equity work, we're happy to learn from you and also be able to impart some of the lessons that we've learned. I think I'm pretty low on time here. So in conclusion, I just want to say, thank you for joining this time. Thank you to the Local Government Commission for putting this type of a summit together. This is a really exciting time to be engaged in this work. I'm really happy to be a part of government work at a time like this when our societies, our communities need it the most. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of your time this morning and throughout the summit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yana. That's so important, such great work. And I'm hoping that our production team can get the Government Alliance for Racial Equity link so that others who are not familiar with GARE can take a look at that and think about joining. And I do applaud Cali PA for what you've done in expanding your tribal outreach through the regions with the tribal coordinators, and what you're also doing with beneficial use definitions. That's really amazing work in a promotion of equity and environmental justice. So thank you once again. I'm sorry we don't have more time for Q&A, Yana, but thank you very, very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
So we're going to transition now to our next session, and we're going to kick off with an overview of the Santa Ana Watershed's approach to identifying and addressing the needs of marginalized communities and tribes. So we're going to be welcoming Valerie Olson. She's a professor at the University of California, Irvine, the Department of Anthropology, and she's going to share SAPA's ethnographic approach to uncovering the local localized water needs of diverse stakeholders. And so, Valerie, if you're prepared, I think she's going to be loading up some slides. And so we'll have her. Hi, Valerie. Thanks for being with us.
Hi, can you hear me?
We sure can. Thank you. Okay, Valerie, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here to follow the speakers, the leaders today, Anacita Agustinez and Yana Garcia. I am so grateful for your work and leadership. I'm speaking to you today from the unceded lands of the Hachivan and Yuhaviatom and Tongva peoples near the San Diego Creek and the cached underground waters of the deep earth, which continue to be impacted by settler colonial and industrial activity in this land. So I'm here today to give you an overview of some of the activities and partnerships that were created during a project that spanned about 2.5 years. My role on it ended last fall. In the fall, when I and Marissa Perez-Reyes finished working on a report, which is available online and was put online at that time. And I'll give you some information about that and give you an update on the current status of the report, which is under revision. So the policy problem that we were faced with was how to improve water systems and infrastructures, but specifically by engaging so-called disadvantaged communities, a term and word that has been overturned and in which we provide an alternative to in the report that we wrote. The challenges were that there was not a strong community-centered evidence base for figuring out what kind of needs people had from communities that were traditionally marginalized and ignored when it came to water planning. And also the challenge that was there, a very distinctive challenge, was sustainable involvement with ongoing and ethical commitment from joint powers authorities and water agencies and other utilities to provide and continue to work with communities long after this project was complete. The scale is the watershed. The watershed is a space of inhabitants. It does not map onto the political geographic markers of settler colonial rule, including counties and cities. It is an interesting space. It's a space informed by gravity, by the flow and fall of water. Under those conditions, the power of the watershed, the political dimensions of the watershed, are often created by powers, in this case, settler colonial powers, having the ability to move and determine the points at which water flows and what happens to water when it gets to those points. The method that we used to engage this work with SAWA, we were brought in to develop an instrument and then to start a process that allowed for community-based engagement. The partners involved in this are, which I'll show in a minute, basically we're working together to try to do a community-based process. It was a relational process. Ethnography is a process based on showing up and becoming a part of or joining with people in communities through interviewing, participant observation, which means we join in and are taught by communities that we engage with how to live and how to work with them. Ethnography is traditionally open-ended qualitative data to capture content and experience. It is not necessarily based in survey research, although surveys can be used, but we tried to open the door to a more interactive listening and embodied presence-based rather than extractive and distanced survey-based engagement. So the funder for this was Santa Ana Watershed Project Authority through the Prop 1 DCI program. And what was originally called for was a needs assessment. And that's a particular concept that all of you are probably quite familiar with. And the goal of it, the formal official goal of it, was to provide technical assistance, selection, and funding for projects, but also to try to create pathways and conduits for participatory planning. The project partners were universities, CSU San Bernardino, Fullerton, and UC Irvine. We have now the Sacred Places Institute for Indigenous Peoples involved. The local government commission was involved and continues to be, Cal Rural Water Association, and the Water Education Foundation. And these groups are collaborating still to continue to add information to the report and to continue to develop it, as I'll indicate in just a little bit. So our report went live last fall, right around November, I believe. And this is the link, and you might all be familiar with it. And what we tried to do in this report, and I'd like you to direct you to the report, if you haven't already seen it, please take a look, was to do a strengths and needs assessment. So instead of to just do a needs assessment, which marks people's voices and contributions with the idea of need, rather than to acknowledge strengths and the work of people that are already doing activities to either resist or to deal with ongoing hydraulic injustice. And we also had, the project also included a GIS tool that's under development to create accurate mapping of so-called disadvantage in the watershed area. We did a civic ethnography, meaning that we tried to collaborate with electeds, water providers, tribal groups, local community groups, to try to work together to produce the data and information in this report. We had some novel aims. So we were setting out to reverse the expert information flow. So rather than simply going in a traditional sense into a community and saying, this is what you need, the idea was to simply listen and to listen to water stories. It was extremely open-ended. We asked two very open-ended questions about people's water experiences and water stories to elicit the broadest and most autonomous capability, a narrative of people involved in the project. We tried to do engaged and responsive research. The Newkirk Center for Science and Society have two engagement scholars who worked hard to expand the participatory collaboration networks. We had a series of those established by CSU. The Newkirk Center added to those participatory collaboration networks in the summer before the report was finished. So the aim there was to create and strengthen relationships. So when it comes to ethnography, ethnography has some advantages and disadvantages. The advantage with ethnography is that there's whole data forms, there's actual stories, there's information, people speaking in whole sentences, being able to tell their stories their own ways. There is a potential for sustained engagement. Usually ethnographers are involved at least for a year with communities they work with, and really and realistically for the rest of their lives. Disadvantage is that the sampling is not so clean cut, it's intensive, there's a lot of infinite variables, and you have to have trained analysts involved. Many organizations use surveys instead of our ethnographic approach to complete the Prop 1 requirements. Obviously, the advantages are that surveys are much more simple and easier and cost-effective to produce, but they also produce, their authority is based on statistical power, on aggregating, in my opinion, as an ethnographer, losing valuable and important information by aggregating and telling people what options they have to respond. So there's an administrative bias as well. So our ethnography was conducted in places that people felt comfortable, in places where their organizations were graciously hosting us to come and be involved and to speak with people. The ethnography report that was finally produced had an aim to be ethnographically informed. Those two open-ended questions were used for not only communities, but also elected officials and for water agencies, large and small. We did this engaged listening. We had academic engaged partnerships. And what we were collecting was a lot of narrative. that then had to be transcribed and analyzed for themes and important terms and concepts that rose to the fore that would allow us to do sort of the showcase piece of this project, which is to really see the connections and disconnections between these different groups, these different social groups, elected officials, community groups, tribal groups, and also the water agencies, the mutual water companies and water agencies. And what we wanted to do was to see connections and disconnections between these groups and their perceptions of the process. So I want to give you an example of what such disconnections and connections revealed to us. We looked at the idea, the concept of water quality, and we saw over and over from the perspective of communities, there was a mistrust, not a trust of the tap, but a mistrust. And we have a series of tables in our document in which whole phrases and sentences and even paragraphs of people's voices are represented in order to preserve the integrity of their experience and of their critique, but also their sense of what needs to be done about this problem. And we found connections. We found that across the board among these groups, there were concerns with how people were becoming informed or uninformed and how they were experiencing the variable of quality. And we found disconnections as well. Agencies, elected, and otherwise advantaged persons versus lay community tap-based perspectives. So the perspective of people with the authority and power to produce the water and push it through taps, and people in the areas of receiving water through their taps. And it revealed hidden factors of power and exclusion, which we detail in the report, where trust is a situated variable. By situated, it means where you sit, where your tap is, what tap you're using, housing status. We found such important information from people who are renting and have no power to control the quality of their house infrastructure, whereas water agencies can guarantee the quality of water coming from the agency. The house itself becomes a problem. And also we were looking at tap-based sensory evidence. When people say that their water smells bad, tastes bad, and they don't trust it, to really set that up against the official reports of water quality, so that we're trying to help water agencies and the powers involved in producing water for consumers, that quality is a situated variable as well. If someone is experiencing discolored water, experiencing sensory mistrust, or also a fear of contamination, that is completely legitimate and needs to be followed through. So we have a lot of possibilities here coming up. We've got the possibilities that ethnography presents to us, which I've listed here, of soliciting local knowledge and needs. We had in this some time constraints, some relationship building constraints. We had a small amount of time to be inclusive. We feel that the report needs to be more attentive to race and class variables. It is under revision right now. It is a living document. That's the advantage of a government document like this, and I look forward to its next forms. Thank you so much for the ability to be here today. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Valerie, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how the reports, and I've had, the pleasure of some early sneak peeks of that. And I think what you mentioned about that it is a living document, it's under revision, it means that, you're thinking and responding to community concerns. And so I really applaud SAWA for taking that pause in order to make sure that the community's voices are there and elevated. So thank you. And thank you for that incredible work. So we're going to be now entering our first round of concurrent sessions, and everyone should see the sessions button on their left side panel. When you select that button, it will take you to the sessions page. And at any point, if you have any problems or issues, please email summit@lgc.org, and we'll help you troubleshoot. Once you're in the sessions and you can select. One of the your options are 2A, 2B, and 2Cs. So 2A session is called Models of Outreach and Engagement, and it will be facilitated by Atlee Keller. And I want to just highlight our panels for session 2A. Keita Price, Robin Freeman, Jonathan Pilch, Azucena Lopez, and Sonia Sanchez. I think that's going to be an awesome panel, and really thank all those panelists for speaking of how we're modeling outreach and engagement. And session 2B is moving from needs assessment to implementation, and that'll be facilitated by Danielle Dolan. And the panelists on session 2B will be Catherine Gledhill, Steve Navarez, Joanna Lassard, and Lance Eckhart. Again, a wealth of knowledge and experience. And I think that if your organization is at the level of moving beyond the needs assessment to implementation, you'll hear some really good examples from leaders that have been in IRWM from the very, very beginning. And your next option is session 2C. That's post-implementation and reassessing in a times of crisis. And that session will be facilitated by Emily Finnegan. And so the panels will consist of Dory Beats, Stephen Caesar, Cindy Doris, Anne-Marie Mendoza, Taylor Chang, James Mueller, Roxana Franco, and Julio Garcia. So I don't envy any of you are having to make some session choices, but I think that you'll see that our summit planners want to give options of where you are in your region. So thank you, everyone. Join your sessions, and we'll see you shortly back.
Welcome back, everyone, from that brief break. I hope you enjoyed your breakout sessions. In a moment, we are about to move to our regional small group discussions where you meet with others in your area to debrief the sessions that you've just participated in and talk through the strategies, tools, and resources mentioned thus far throughout the summit that can be applied locally. You've each been assigned to a region based on the responses in your registration form. If you run into issues joining your region for whatever reason, please email summit@lgc.org and we'll help you find your way in. The chat should still be pinned from this morning for the day 2 agenda, that PDF link. That's where you can find the facilitation guides with the discussion questions for your regional groups. But your facilitators will also be able to post that in the chat. And with that, you can now all head to your regional breakout sessions by selecting the sessions button in the left-hand panel. Once you are in the session, you should see the region. Go ahead and click into that, and your facilitator will be waiting for you. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. This is our final session of the day, and the Community and Tribal Leaders panel. And I just really want to thank everyone who's learning to navigate the technology. I have to admit, I was a little bit frustrated and figuring it out myself, but I keep saying we keep learning more and more, and we just get better with the tools at our disposal. And I really do appreciate our production team, because this is new technology to me, and I'm really impressed that we're able to do these breakouts so that we really can feel like we can have those smaller group discussions. So let's go back to our final session. This is really, I've been really looking forward to this, and it's an honor and a pleasure to be able to speak and moderate this next panel with 4 esteemed guests. Please, if you're not familiar with them, check out their bios in the attendee packet. I'd like to first introduce Keita Price, the hood planter. Keita Price, the hood planter. Chairman Val Lopez with the Amamutsan Tribal Band. Canyon Coyote Woman Sayers Roots. She's with the Association of Ramaytush Ohlone. And Izzy Martin from the Sierra Fund. So we're going to welcome everybody situated and got all your mics on, and I think we've all done a good sound check. We're going to have a couple of questions, and I'm going to ask an opening question And when I'm at, I'd like to have each of you speak to it with a few minutes. And the question is, can each of you share an outreach engagement experience that you've had with a public agency or a process where you anticipated, the process itself or the experience would be negative, but it turned out to have some positive outcomes, or even vice versa, where you may have had a positive anticipation and it may have turned in the other direction. But that'll be the first question, and I'm going to ask our production team to type it into the chat so that you could see that question. But I'd like to first recognize, Honorable Chairman Val Lopez. Thank you for being here and taking time out of your busy day. Canyon and Izzy and Keita, thank you so much. And Chairman, if we're ready, can we start with you with that question?
I'll be happy to. Thank you very much, Anasita. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. So you want to share an outreach or engagement experience that we thought was going to be negative, but it turned out to have some positive outcomes. We have some of those examples. In 2007, we got a invitation to go to State Park's land north of Santa Cruz and to participate in an archaeological field school that was happening there with UC Berkeley. And it was a site that was a first contact site with the Waswas ancestors, the people of that land. And at first I said, no way, no, we would never do that. Why would we ever want to do that? Our tribal thinking at that time was that state parks and a lot of the other state agencies that own land and stuff like that, they just want to dig up our ancestors and send them to a museum and or put them on a fireplace mantle somewhere, and that's it. And disturbing our ancestors is the greatest violation of our spiritual belief that there is. And so we said no, and that was it. We thought that was going to be our final answer. But then we had a student from our tribe who was going to participate in that field school, and he came and talked to us, and he said that they're going to do something new. They're going to do a really low impact excavations where they just take out a approximately 1 foot by 1 foot test unit, and they're only going to take out 4 or 5 of those. And then before they do that, they would do underground penetrating radar and look for anomalies that would indicate that. And State Parks was very encouraging here too, and said that our tribe could have yes/no authority on whether that pit, whether that test pit would be worked or not. And so with that, we said yes. But as a result of that, we developed very good relationships with UC Berkeley, and there was other institutions there as well, Stanford and UC Santa Cruz as examples. And then with State Parks, we started developing a really good, strong relationship with State Parks and talking to them almost on a daily basis and working with them. And we probably did that for 6-7 years. And today we recognize how important and valuable that archaeology work is. And we also realize how important those relationships are with landholdings. We are a federally unrecognized tribe. We own no land. And so the only, so we have to depend on relationships for us to get access to our land. Today, we have many MOUs with Bureau of Land Management, national parks, state parks, many open space trusts and land trusts. We have access to over 140,000 acres within our tribal territory, and we depend on those relationships. A couple things that are important here is that our tribe must have decision-making authority on a lot of on how the cultural resources studies are going to go. And we have yes/no authority on whether a project goes forward or not. And the other thing is we tell people right up front, our partners and our friends only get one opportunity with us. If they blow it just one time, we're done with them. We'll walk away. In my lifetime, we'll never work with them again. So that's another important part of relationships. And I'll stop there, Anacita. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chairman. Appreciate that. Kita, did you get the question? And I'd like to hear from you about sharing an engagement experience that you've had where you could have anticipated to be negative, but you had a different outcome, or the vice versa, where you were brought into a position where you expected good outcomes and then it may have turned something negative.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm gonna go with the vice versa. We try to not go into bad situations if we think it's gonna be bad, too bad, or try not to have that thinking because your thoughts become reality. So, in that sense, vice versa, we try to go into government contracts with good faith. In case folks don't know, again, I'm Keita Price, the Hood Planner, but I'm also with the East Oakland Collective. So we do a lot of community engagement for racial and economic justice. And I do a lot of neighborhood and transportation planning. So I'm a direct liaison between the community and the city of Oakland transportation department and sometimes strategic planning. And so through some of our past and current projects, as we have good faith in going into these projects now that the city have these departments and more language of equity, trying to put it to the test and see what implementation and the action behind that look like. And so the city just continued to fall short to us, even with all of the rhetoric of equity and inclusion. And so we have a process that we went through called the East Oakland Neighborhood Initiative, also known as EONI. And so the East Oakland Collective and about 12 other groups partner with the City of Oakland's planning department to do an equitable climate community and neighborhood driven plan that was funded by the state, the Transformative Climate Communities grant. And so we went through a year-long planning process, together, and we really led this process and how we wanted to engage communities. And so we worked very closely with a planner. And so going into the project, we expected to work with although still white male, like the typical planners are in the department, this guy was still more kind of cool and not necessarily progressive or liberal, but just willing to do what needs to be done and ask questions that need to be asked on behalf of community. So we had this more seasoned planner that started on with the project with us. And then we ended up having he left and went to another job. And so we ended up getting a more younger white planner who just came into just adopted City of Oakland's traditional culture of planning, and kind of that's how he operated with us. And so, we're more on a participatory planning hype and just centering community and, not necessarily definitely not coming from where the city is coming from and just checking the boxes and worrying about the bottom line, the economic drive of things. And so just going through this process, we just had a lot of back and forth and not being aligned of how we saw things. And so myself in particular in the group is kind of seen or known as more outspoken. And so I work with this planner a lot, this white young planner a lot, and just experienced a lot of just emotional that I feel paid and unaccounted through this process.
Keita, I'm sorry. I think we just lost your mic. And production, are we going to be able to get her back, or should we just put a pause on that and go to the next the next one? I was going to queue you up, Izzy, for the same question. Let's do that. Izzy, I think you've heard the question. Can you share that experience with us?
Yes, thank you. First, Anacita and everyone on the panel, I'm so honored to be on this panel with you. Other than Anacita, I've never met you. I want to thank also Department of Water Resources and Local Government Commission for this opportunity to talk about these critical issues. And this issue of a sow's ear into a silk purse, something we thought that was going to go wrong, but went right. I want to introduce briefly the Sierra Fund. We were created 20 years ago to try to begin to address the impacts of the gold rush. most people here probably realize that the mining era was crazy destructive. It blew apart mountains looking for gold using power washing called hydraulic mining. They cut down almost every tree to timber the mines and build the towns of the Silver Strike on either side of the mountain range. The mountains blew so much apart that the rivers were running with hydraulic mining debris that filled up the bay, destroyed the estuary. But the worst destruction of that time was the impact on the human beings that had been tending this beautiful landscape for thousands of years, this beautiful landscape that my people came into and destroyed. The Sierra Fund works on building the ecosystem resiliency and the community resiliency where we live. And I want to talk today about an effort to restore community resiliency by working with tribal people, a project that I thought was going to go wrong, but it seems to have come out very right. I want to say from the beginning, we've always worked with tribal leadership in our programs as the leaders. We define our role as helping to what we call cut the red tape that my people have created around everything from insurance to managing grants to holding ceremony on public land. So the clear desire for recognition, for federal recognition, is an outstanding need that we are always trying to support the unrecognized tribes in our state on. But what we have more ability to work on is the second request we've heard from tribal leadership since we began working, which was the request to have land returned, their land returned to them. What could be more just? So 20 years ago, I was on the Board of Supervisors. I was part of a lawsuit against PG&E, and that lawsuit was trying to get PG&E to pay the money they owed to the state. Rather than doing that, PG&E and the legislature created a project to give away land as reparations, if you will, for what PG&E had done. So one of the areas of the state that had beautiful land coming back to it was up in the northern part of the Feather River, and that effort to bring that land back to that area was led by the Mountain Maidu. Beginning in 2006, that would be 14 years ago, the Sierra Fund began working with Mountain Maidu. We shared our documents and materials with their young leader who has sadly passed. They got their application into the process, 10 years of meetings, application changes, negotiations, and patience. My big concern in working with tribal people was that the PG&E process would be captured by state parks or federal government or big environmental organizations based in LA or San Francisco or New York, and that the land would have more absentee landowners instead of original people getting their hands on this land. So the Sierra Fund dedicated ourselves to working on this. It's a very long haul. Well, after all of these years, the Mountain Maidu Summit was given their land back in the Feather River, a watershed known as Tasman-Koyam. 15 years later, we're still there working with them. We support traditional ecological knowledge and Western ecological knowledge. We call it Tech and WEC in their project work. Just a couple of weeks ago, our staff were at Tasman-Koyam working with tribal youth and members to build the beaver dam analogs to help bring beaver back into the valley, doing training on water quality monitoring equipment, hanging out with generations of Mountain Maidu. My staff reported one scene where tribal elders were standing on the side of the creek, heckling the youth to do it right. And the sense of joy and accomplishment, something real out of something terrible. And so I really want to say that project was scary. We kept thinking it wasn't going to happen. We had another project for tribal people fall out of the process. But what we've learned is the first move in any region must be to locate and listen to the original people of the region and how to support their efforts if they ask for help. The wrong first move is to approach tribal people and ask them to endorse your grant proposal. A commitment to justice and perseverance of effort must be proven before tribal people can trust white people like me to support their efforts. As we just heard the chairman say, this is a one-time only opportunity through the door, an opportunity we never gave the original people of this area. It takes years to get important work done, and the only thing worth doing is this long-term important work, which is mostly about building personal relationships. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to tell that story. It's a story that goes on into the future. It's the first land Mountain Maidu Summit has owned since we came and stole everything 150 years ago.
Great. No, thank you, Izzy, for that. And it's always great to hear you and your stories. I appreciate that. Kenyon, please let's go to you, and would love to hear an experience you can share about the amazing journey your family and your community have done over the years.
Mishmin Tuhis, Countercut Canyon, Coyote Woman, Sayers Roots, daughter of Tribal Chairwoman Anne Marie Sayers of Indian Canyon Mutsun Band. Currently with the Doctip Irwin, I am a representative of the Association of Ramaytush Ohlone Peoples in the 9 counties, northern counties. I want to voice that because I started a business around consultation, I am lucky and blessed to interact with many different agencies, small and large. And there was a little project in the East Bay Territory, and with every agreement that I get into, I always make sure that they have a live document to clarify that if the Indigenous peoples of the territory want anything changed, that they have the first voice, first priority. And I, as a California native, can offer insight on lived experiences and possible reasonable ways to navigate what does it mean to offer land acknowledgements, or what does it mean to consult with Indigenous peoples. However, the Native peoples have the right to decline and may not be interested, and the organization shouldn't just do the, well, we have them or we don't, or we reached out and they never got back to us. There are other things that the community can always do to raise awareness of honoring truth and history, learning about the history of the land that they are on. So I was lucky to work with a little watershed project, Rahim Creek, I think, and I initially saw the email and it felt as though they had a tiny bit of space on a page where they wanted to acknowledge the land relatively well to honor truth and history. And I was almost feeling as though, oh, it's a quick tokenistic one-off where there's already a preset amount of space, there's a quick timeline, there's a tiny budget, and I want people to learn truth and history, so I don't immediately like turn away. And what came of it was something really, really beautiful. It was that one of their representatives didn't speak for their group because we then had a second meeting. However, it turned into more than what I initially thought was available. And it was that they really do want to be advocates for truth and history. That, one, we acknowledge the Indigenous groups of the territory, because in the East Bay, there are 3 large active groups: Himrin, the Confederated Villages of Lashawn, and the Muwekma tribe, who are all doing amazing work around language revitalization, cultural revitalization, stewardship of their lands, and protecting sacred sites on an ongoing basis, with support or not. And so for their community, this organization that hired my consultation services, for them to want to be advocates or claim that they are in solidarity with Indigenous peoples, I was really happy to witness that they were ready and willing to have that live document. They were ready and willing to even leverage their audience on their websites to have an interactive page, to have links, because it was going to be a produced book, so having URLs in a book is not always that grand. But on their website, having live links to the Indigenous peoples groups and active issues that are going on an ongoing basis, ready and willing to leverage their audience to point out, or if the Native groups of the territory wanted to highlight projects, that would be given immediate precedence. And even a willingness to do a research project to highlight elders of the community, to interview Ruth Orta and talk about acorns and traditional ecological knowledge and watershed stewardship. It was really wonderful to witness an organization that didn't know what it didn't know and take steps to open up and leverage. What does it really mean to acknowledge the land? What does it really mean to acknowledge that we are benefiting day after day after day on stolen land, and we're taking these steps? So honoring truth and history is a great way, and I'm really lucky to be part of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenyon. I mean, I'd like to repeat what you said about honoring truth and history. Chairman Lopez, before I do that, I wanted to say I think we've lost Izzy's feed, and so we're working on that. And so we'll
no, I'm here.
Yes, are you, Izzy, on phone?
No, I can see you and I can see
Oh, okay,
myself
great.
because I'm in the show.
Oh, yeah, that's Izzy. Kita's feed. I'm sorry.
That's right, Tina.
And so if we get her back, we'll let her finish her comments to the first question. But Chairman Lopez, I'd like to ask you the next question. And the next question is, can you describe your perspective on how public agencies' tribal engagement has changed during your current leadership, and how your tribe's interaction has changed with state and local agencies?
Well, well, one thing that's changed is that a lot of, the governor came out and said all departments must have a consultation policy as an example. And some departments take that serious. They want to do, they want to seriously consult and understand the interests and the desires of tribes. But others, they just see that as a check the box and move on. And it's not only between departments, but it can be between employees within that department. If you're talking to one employee, to one particular employee, that person will tell you, will work with you and try to help you. Whereas others, again, they don't have patience and no interest. The other thing that's, and then the other thing is that those consulting, those consultation policies, and this we've talked about this. A number of us have talked about this. Those consultation policies say nothing about recognizing our truth and our history and the impact of that history on our people and our culture and our spirituality. I mean, those things are ignored and erased by the state of California. A lot of people think that the tribes are nothing more than myths and folklore, and that's very troubling. But if states can learn how to can talk to us in a sincere way and truly try to help us do serious consultation and work with us to protect our cultural resources, our sacred sites, our cultural sites, etc. That's what we need, and that's what we would like to have. But for now, they have a very thin area that they can consult with us on. For example, whenever they come out with a draft, with an EIR, a draft environmental impact report, for a state project, such as the high-speed rail, they just want, they have that whole system. They know exactly what they want to do, and they're not going to be deterred. And that's what we're dealing with. We've been trying to consult with high-speed rail since 2004. And they're still telling the same story and putting the same alignment and the same construction that they were from the very beginning. And we feel like, many different kinds of consultation has not made an impact at all. But then other state agencies, I mean, I know we worked with the Department of Energy one time on a project. They're calling me after hours, because I'm very busy. They're calling me after hours or scheduling appointments. And if I needed to cancel it and reschedule, they were fine with that. And that, and they were truly, I felt that they were truly interested in reaching out to us. And that was really welcoming to see. And then, I said we did a lot of research in our tribe. And one area that we've done a lot of research at is how our ancestors stewarded and took care of Mother Earth. And what we're learning is that the way we took care of it is going to be very important for surviving and dealing with climate change. Our native plants, they develop deep root systems. They'll go down 15 and 20 feet. Well, that type of root system is very resistant to drought, to fire, and to flooding. And so, you know, and also whenever the mudslides and stuff like that, those deep root systems will hold the soil together. So there's a lot of benefits to restoring our native plants. Currently, in the state of California, only 4% of all landscapes in California. You drive along any freeway and you look at there at the grasses and stuff like that. That's all 96% invasive, and that's just a horrible thing. So, and now that we're talking about climate change and we have that research behind us, people are starting to believe us because we have the research backing us. A good example of that is fire and doing traditional and cultural burns. Whenever we talked about it, nobody listened to us. But whenever we talk about, traditional uses of fire and stuff like that now, because the science has verified it or proved it. Now they'll believe that our ancestors did, regularly burn landscapes, and that helped control the catastrophic buildup of grasses, and it was also helped maintain, for example, the central coast of California was a coastal prairie. And that was one of the most biodiverse landscapes in Northern California. Well, whenever they outlawed fire, and all three periods of colonization outlawed fire, in came the shrubs, and then in came the trees, and that coastal prairie and the biodiversity is lost now. And we're working hard to try and find ways to restore that central coast so that we can restore that biodiversity and also provide our food plants. A lot of the plants that we were maintaining at that time, and those grasses and stuff like that, those were our foods, our medicines, our basketry, and a lot of other purposes. So we're working hard to do that. And now, people are starting to listen and wanting to work with our tribe. And we say if we're going to survive, and if we're going to deal with climate change, it must be indigenous led, and we truly and totally believe that. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much, Anacita.
Anacita, you are muted. If you want to just go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman, so much. And really appreciate what you said about that participation. I think that's really important. And so, and what a story about how perspectives have changed throughout the years. And a lot of great leadership under yourself and your many tribal members who worked very long and hard. Canyon, I'd like to have you also address that same question, and if you could tell us a little bit about how things have changed under your current leadership with state and local agencies in that participation process.
I want to acknowledge that my mother, Anne Marie Sayers, has been monitoring and protecting sacred sites since the early 80s, and she's watched a lot, and a lot has evolved. And now, as I step into continuing her legacy in both stewarding our homelands as well as going out and recognizing that, well, our ancestral remains, our cultural resources need to be respected and considered in various projects, that we need cultural sensitivity training. We need cultural competency training between Indigenous peoples and these agencies, because many times the parameters are of these agencies, and it's a one-sided view, and it's a demand that Indigenous peoples have to meet their criterion. You have so many days to respond. If you don't, you're not part of the process. Oh, you were either here or you're not, and you may have made comments or you didn't, versus actual real relationship building, actual considerations of acknowledging, say, like CEQA, California Environmental Qualities Act, or NAGPRA. That being said, when it comes to like considering honoring truths in history and the steps that I've seen, well, I'm feeling blessed that I didn't have to be in the environment my mother did, with the various agencies like archaeological firms wanting to dig and study and study and dig, and then construction workers who want to press on through the timeline, and the indigenous community who are, well, sometimes only invited as a matter of circumstance to follow rules to watch our ancestral sacred spaces be desecrated. Now I'm really happy to witness archaeological firms really prioritizing the indigenous voice in clarifying that it's not good to engage in destructive analysis. We can be proactive and collaborate together. And it's really important that if we talk about what collaborative efforts are these organizations and institutions partnering with indigenous peoples of the territory? Many times we're on the very bottom, like you made your project, you have your budget, you're doing all these things, you're getting your permits, and then you barely acknowledge an environmental impact report or the considerations of abiding by CEQA regulation. And then they reach out to the people saying, oh, by the way, Native people, are you okay with this happening here and devastating this area? Versus, let's go all the way to the top. Have you interacted with or have a collaboration with indigenous peoples? And are you taking steps to consider what the needs of the community are? What does it mean to impact their cultural resources? What does it mean to impact their territory? And then possibly get a chance to solve whatever issues that they're engaging in their project. Because so many times everyone else is on corporate time, corporate dime. The Native people are always the last to be considered. Yet, when we think about it, indigenous peoples make up less than 5% of the world's population. Yet we attempt to protect over 85% of the world's biodiversity with limited to no resources. And we still do, because we recognize that this is our obligation. This is our sacred responsibility. By honoring our ancestors, by honoring our elders, by attempting to be good ancestors in training, we continue on. Yet a lot of these agencies, they may not be as proactive because they wait to be on their time. They set down a project at the end of the business day and then pick it the next day. Native peoples, we're answering calls, we're answering letters with no capacity or infrastructure because this matters to us. It's our obligation. It's not the Western colonial construct of being entitled or to enterprise or to capitalize off of these cultural resources. So I recognize how lucky I am to be here. And my mother says it's the best time. Today is the best day and the best time to be an indigenous person since contact. And I will too follow her quote to say that day in and day out, because each day is a bit better.
Well, thank you for sharing good words from your mother. She's such an honored elder and such a strong leader. And it's my interactions with her have been just so memorable and inspiring. So you've got the best teacher. Very fortunate. Thank you for that. Izzy, I'd like to ask you the next question. Could you share whether, from your perspective, how state or local agencies have gotten community engagement right? And a follow-up to that is, if you could change an existing state policy that has negatively affected or impacted community or tribal inclusion, what would you change? Giving you all the power in the world in the state of California. Executive privilege.
Well, first of all, I really appreciate hearing the youthful voice of Canyon. I think I'm an ancestor in training that's a little closer to that ancestor part. And over my 40 years in this movement, I've been involved in lots of processes which have often gone terribly. I spent the first 20 years working with the farm worker movement and the last 20 years working on the impacts of mining in the Sierra. And much of that's been pretty awful. But I do want to say, a good thing and a bad thing. I participated in the lobbying effort that ended up resulting in Prop 1 and the Disadvantaged and Community and Tribal Needs Assessment Program. I was at years of meetings and demanding, trying to get this concept into people's heads. When it came out, of course, nothing is as one would hope it would be. It's all very difficult to implement such a neat idea. How do we go out and listen to the community and find out what their needs are actually prior to, it's a crazy idea, prior to trying to meet those needs. Let's go. I know, Canyon is like, geez. So we were eager, and the Sierra Fund joined what was called then the Mountain County Funding Area as the representative from CABI, but we weren't the only. When they started this process up where we live, the Mountain County Funding Area gave us an opportunity to send representatives to this coordinating committee, and the Consensus American Bear Yuba CABI, Integrated Regional Water Management Group, said, we want to be represented by a tribal person. So we sent Shelley Covert, who's Nisenan Foothills. I literally drove with her because, of course, there was no stipends to participate in these things. Lucky if you get a bad sandwich, you know. So we would go to these meetings together. Shelley would speak. And there was another piece of it. Wasn't only the underrepresented or underestimated communities of the tribal people, but also the Latino, the poor people that live up in the Sierra. To address those needs, we hired a Spanish-speaking community organizer with EJ background, and he started to go talk to people where we live about water quality and water access. And I'm in the Sierra. We have fabulous water still. There's problems up here, but that's not our problem. What everybody wanted to talk about, guess what? It was about burning to death. It was about fire. It was about the air quality being horrible. It was about low-income people not having access to resources, not even the fire-safe resources being in Spanish. There's not a lot of Spanish speakers in the Sierra, but there are a lot of folks that do live up there that don't speak only English. And so there was a huge gap in that understanding. But I wanted to tell a little story about bringing Shelley Covert to the Mountain County Funding Area. Our area was given only $13 million for the whole Sierra Nevada, so much less than even Pitt or Inyo, and way less than the coasts. And so we had very little money and a lot of area to the headwaters of the state of California to cover. And at the first meeting, Shelley Covert came into this meeting with a bunch of all other white people. Everyone else is there, water agencies. They're all getting paid their government dime on their government time, right? And one of the guys says to Shelley says, we need to have our own tribal outreach program. It has to be only us running that program. And one of the water agency guys, a fellow from the Tuolumne Stanislaus, said, what? Now he didn't go like, why? Or like, eh. He asked a genuine question, and Shelley took the time to give a genuine answer. And after, it was like magic. It was like the room began to change as all of them heard what she had to say. And after she was done, people said, okay. No fighting, no disagreement, no insistent that we have well, if we're going to do that, we need to have the Italian outreach. I mean, it was none of that baloney. So I think that was extremely exciting. It was pretty historic. Shelley and I sang in the car all the way home. But that wasn't enough. There's a lot of drawbacks. The lack of long-term funding is the whole problem. The lack of general support funding is the whole problem. You start these relationships and then they dissolve. We started off our CABI, Integrated Regional Water Management Group, being able to pay for tribal participation, a stipend. It's like, try to get an attorney to come to your meeting for mileage and a bad sandwich. They're not going to come. And they're less valuable. They're less rare than tribal spokespeople. So not enough money, not enough understanding of how to invest the money, too much people wanting to do the thing where they rush in and thank God they figured out your problem, tribal people, and you just need to endorse their program. And they'll give you $50 to come to the meeting. There's just so much wrong thinking about how you do this. There needs to be long-term investment in relationship building. A good thing on the horizon, the State Water Resources Control Board seems to understand that water rights are not some fake thing that only belong to big cities. That tribal water rights are durable and powerful. And thank God they're finally getting there. So there's some news on the horizon that gets better, but I think that the IRWIMs are now going away. They're not even we spent 15 years building these relationships where we can have that conversation I just reported, and now all the money's gone.
Just like that.
It's not all about money. It isn't all about money.
No.
But nobody is expected to do this work for free except folks like the indigenous people that are probably on this line right here. And it's just an outrage. The Sierra Fund has done a lot of work where we live to pay people and bring things, to listen to what they want and not disagree with them or muddle with it, or try to pick our beak, put our nose into the money that's going to them. There's all of these bad things that I see happening when people try to work with tribes. That is very, it's the culture, our white culture, our capitalist culture keeps coming in. So I really want to thank the chairman and the young Canyon for helping me to hear and learn more from you.
That's great, Izzy. Really appreciate that, and especially that perspective. I think I'd like to. There's a question that's come in from the chat, and it's actually a complicated question. So I'm gonna, and it has to do with the question is there a utility in using Western science to quantify TEK that tribes have known and worked for thousands of years, if for no other reason than to co-create a common body of knowledge, linking Western science and traditional ecological knowledge? And then it goes on to say that the question goes on to say, or does the persistent need to quantify simply serve to continue, replicate, and validate colonial value systems? Very complicated question. It could be a panel discussion for days. But I'd like to just ask, Chairman and Canyon, if you could talk a little bit about TEK, because I mean, we look at that and it's a little bit like what you mentioned, Canyon, your perspective earlier about land acknowledgement. Are they just going through a process or emotion? And now we're seeing TEK being adopted. I'd like to, talk to you as subject matter experts. Can you let's have you the last few minutes just talk about TEK. And Canyon, would you like to go first, and then Chairman?
Yeah, traditional ecological knowledge sharing is so very important, from as simple as storytelling, but also listening to the land. My mother taught me that if I'm going to benefit off of anything, if I'm going to eat, if I'm going to sustain myself, I would need to do it in the right way, and that is offer a gift or recognize the life that's lived and the gift that's given. So my mother taught me to offer a pinch of tobacco or a song or even a strand of my hair to the plants. And I recognize where it comes from. So bringing that into our procedures and practices, recognizing how much we impact the world around us. Where did that fruit come from? Where do these resources come from that we're benefiting off of day in and day out because we need to eat and we need to drink? Are we accounting for where this comes from? From as simple as, I really wish garbage agencies would leave their waste so the community has to learn how to manage its mess, because this out of sight, out of mind idea is creating more complacent, entitled people who just want to consume and think it's not my problem, I don't need to see it. A lot of indigenous teachings that I've been brought up in around traditional ecological knowledge has taught me how to be responsible and attempt to be considerate of all living systems. How do my actions and my words impact not only myself, my family, the community, the environment, but the next 7 generations? How are the decisions being made going forward? Consider that. And so, the book, Tending the Wild, written by Kat Anderson, she got so much flack for being a woman in science, in STEM research, as well as so much of the Western colonial construct, especially around academia and around research, break apart, put together, barely ever acknowledges holistic systems, let alone qualitative data. If any of you have a chance to look up suddenoaklife.org, I really appreciate the research that these community members are doing. They're non-Indigenous, however, they found archival record talking about how the Spaniards wrote in their journals that some areas were burned and how they would have to prepare by bringing wood. And I'm sitting here like, oh, so the colonizers' Western lens was quite limited in archiving and validating and cataloging and creating a written historical record of how much indigenous peoples were truly the first ecologists, the first environmentalists, the first land managers, the first doctors, and how the colonial narrative is constantly perpetuating this construct of Native American hunter-gatherer and dismissing traditional ecological knowledge and the wisdom of our ancestors. If we didn't have batteries, generators, technology today, could you last 5 days without benefiting from all of the systems that we are not even contemplating or being appreciative of? We're just taking advantage of. What does it mean to allow our decisions and our actions to consider that impact? And what does it mean to be a part of that system versus something or someone that's entitled to and just benefits off of? And so I try and bring these perspectives into conversations everywhere I go, because I really do believe that we can strategize sustainable futures leaning to indigenous pedagogy's teachings. But that always needs to remain. We need to also acknowledge indigenous protocol. Who people of these lands that we benefit off of, and are they part of the conversation? Nothing about us without us. If people want to lean to indigenous wisdoms, they best be sure Native peoples are part of the conversation. They can't just cherry pick an enterprise off of it. So traditional ecological knowledge is just one step, and breaking down these systems that have been silencing marginalized community voices, like, we need to shift that. So
No,
I'm lucky.
Yes, absolutely. And we're all lucky to have those words shared with us. Thank you very much, Canyon. I'm going to go to Chairman Lopez, and there's another great question via the chat from our audience. And I'm going to read the question, Chairman. It's, how can white people be better allies with tribal communities to uplift TEK without perpetuating intellectual property right infringements? And we've got about, 5 minutes remaining for you to answer that question. I think it's a very good question from our audience. And I think that really cuts to what Canyon mentioned about TEK, because it's a fine line of intellectual property infringement and what we know historically, with the use of speaking to our elders in the past, and then someone prophetizing from that. And I think we've come a long way from that, but we have to always be prepared from lessons learned. So, Chairman, the question is, how can white people be better allies with tribal communities to uplift TEK without perpetuating intellectual property right infringements?
Well, thank you very much for that question, whoever sent it in. That is an important question. I'm going to start to answer that question by just telling you our creation story and the impacts that had. Our creation story tells us the Creator very specifically picked our people to live on these territories and to take care of Mother Earth and all living things. And for us, all living things are the people, the wildlife, the plants, the oceans, the rivers, the air, the moon, the stars, etc. They are all living, and they're sacred. They have the same the same father we do, Father Sky. They say have the same mother we do, that we have, Mother Earth. They're all sacred. And so with that directive from Creator, that sacred covenant that Creator gave us to take care of Mother Earth and all living things, our people took that responsibility very serious. Very serious. Our people were not hunters and gatherers. They worked hard to fulfill that obligation to Creator. And they did that for 10, 12, 15, perhaps 20,000 years or more. And if you think of that in terms of generations, that could be 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 generations or more that our people have been on this earth. And like today, they want the next generation to know more than what they knew. It's important that they pass on the critical knowledge. And that critical knowledge for us is how to take care of Mother Earth, how to take care of the bears when they do not migrate in our territory, how to keep the rivers clean, how to have ceremony for the salmon, how to have ceremony for the migrating geese, etc. Those are all very important things that our ancestors learned over that period of time. And they learned, first and foremost, that Mother Earth is sacred. And it was our responsibility to maintain that sacredness for Mother Earth. Where is that sacredness today? Where is that sacredness today? People have just monetized Mother Earth and look to make, look how they can make money out of mining and taking the water and polluting the air. There's a lot of money being made in those activities. But how is that maintaining the sacredness of Mother Earth? And those are things that are important. If people are going to learn TEK, it's not just, how do I take care of this medicine plant? Or how do I, how can I, what can I do? And they just want to look at the physical act of taking care of it. That spiritual component is at the heart of everything we do and all that learning. And that is the most important. That is the absolute most important. And so all of our restoration efforts began with restoring the spirituality of Mother Earth. And that is so important to learn. And you don't have to learn our prayers. You don't have to learn our songs and our ceremonies. What's important is that you open your heart and you look to take care of the four-legged, the wing, the fin, to take care of the water and live your life in a way that is respecting Mother Earth, and pray and have a relationship. That whole relationship is so important. You need to have a relationship with the four-legged and the fin, etc. You got to pray for them. You got to treat them with kindness. You have to listen to them, and you have to have a great patience with them. And they will talk to you, and they will tell you what they need. And that's what our ancestors had. They had that ability, and over time, they earned that ability over time to listen to the plants and to learn what was needed. And that's what we do today. That's what we do today. And all our people are working to learn that and to develop those relationships. They are so important. And so those are the important things. Now, I'll just say a couple things about the traditional ecological knowledge and the way most people think about it. A couple really important things is the way that people, is the plants. Every plant, every native plant, I'll say it that way, every native plant has a responsibility to take care of a community. And that community includes the fungi, the insects, the birds, the four-legged, and people as well. I mean, when you drive by and you see these fields and fields and fields of strawberries, or orchards, miles and miles and miles of almond orchards, for example. I mean, how is that taking care of the fungi? There's a fungi there, they're going to spray the hell out of it. If there's weeds there, they're going to put a herbicide there. If there's if insects are getting in there, they're going to spray the heck out of those insects. If deers get into there, they're going to put up these blast charges to scare the four-legged away, or they're going to fence it off to keep them out. I mean, that's not taking care of Mother Earth. The way we are doing things now is not taking care of Mother Earth. With our land trust, we truly believe that a lot of people in the environmental movement, they have good hearts and they want to do the good thing. In the same way there's a lot of people out there with good hearts and they want to do the good thing, but they just don't know what the heck they're doing. They call stewardship acquiring land and putting a trail on there and putting up a sign that says "Be home by dark," and they call that stewardship. Where are those relationships? How are they taking care of the birds and the four-legged? That's what stewardship is. And where's the prayers? That's what stewardship is. So you want to learn TEK, it's more than just learning what this plant is or what that plant is, or is that okay if I eat this plant? Will this sustain me when I'm in the back hills? It's so much more than that. And I can go on for quite a long time, Anacita, but I know you don't want me to do it.
And we could continue to listen, because I do want to say, you know, the messaging, and Izzy, I'm sorry we don't have a more time to get your comments on this topic. I know you'd have a lot to share there through your experiences, and Canyon, you as well. I really think that, you know, having you share what you both shared on TEK, I love that, Canyon, is something. And I really want to say that what we've done right now, hearing the stories from, you know, tribal elders and tribal subject matter expert, we're experiencing that right now through oral tradition. And I really wanted to you know, close our panel with saying that this has been a wonderful experience to hear this. And thank you, Chairman, for sharing that creation story. I mean, there's nothing more sacred than to have that knowledge pass. And I really think that, you know, we were blessed to have you on this. And so I really want to say thanks to everyone. Kita, I'm sorry that we lost you. I don't know if you're able to hear us or not. You know, we'll look forward to hearing more from you in the future. And I want to thank my panels. And I think at this point, we'll turn this over back to our production crew. But thanks, everyone. And Emily, it's back to you.
Absolutely. Thank you to our phenomenal panelists, Chairman Lopez, Canyon, Izzy, and to Kita when she was able to join us. I have been calling and texting, trying to get through, but such is the virtual world that we live in, where there are connectivity issues. We deeply appreciate our MC for today, Anacita Augustines, as well, and all of you for your patience as we navigate this new platform. My colleagues will be sending the evaluation for today's summit in the chat if they have not already, so we can get your feedback. We know that there were many tech issues today for some of you, and we want to make sure that we're addressing those issues. So we are going to have a little huddle following this meeting, and we'll be sending out communications to all registrants sometime later this afternoon. So please be on the lookout for the link to join tomorrow. We will have folks joining early again, regardless of the platform we used today. The Hopin platform opened at 8 a.m. with the event starting at 9. We are excited tomorrow to bring in some of our state agency partners from the Department of Water Resources, the State Water Board, and California Natural Resources Agency to help us think through how we can carry some of these discussions into other state programs beyond the IRWM program that we know are priorities right now for the state. All of the sessions today have been recorded, both the main stage sessions as well as the concurrent sessions, and they will be available following the summit for you to review. So if you were having issues connecting to audio in those sessions, have no fear. We will have those links up on our website. And with that, we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing many of you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Thank you all.